Sir, I need to verify this boarding pass.
Take your time. The records will speak for themselves. Let's review everything before anyone boards. Sir, we'll have everything confirmed shortly. It's an honor to see you again. Thank you, Captain.
Take one more step toward that cockpit, and you're going out in handcuffs. The security officer's warning cut through Gate 42 as Marcus Reed stood beside his terrified 11-year-old daughter, surrounded by phones, whispers, and the airline employees who had mocked his first-class ticket minutes earlier. Vanessa Cole held the boarding pass between two fingers as though it were counterfeit. "A seat up front doesn't give you access to restricted areas," she said. Marcus didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the red warning light blinking inside, Flight 702. Then the cockpit door opened. Captain Daniel Mercer stepped out, saw Marcus, and froze. Slowly, he removed his cap. Without speaking, the veteran pilot raised his hand in a perfect military salute. The terminal fell silent. Marcus returned the salute. But there was no pride in his face, only fear. He looked toward the aircraft and said, "Ground this plane. If it takes off, the next salute may be at a funeral. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. And subscribe for more powerful stories of courage, family, and justice." The morning began long before sunrise in a modest brick duplex tucked into a quiet neighborhood in Decatur, Georgia. Marcus Reed sat alone at the kitchen table beneath a warm yellow light, carefully tightening the final screw on a cracked plastic corner of his daughter's project case. His hands, rough from years of repairing emergency communication systems for hospitals and fire departments, moved with remarkable precision. Every few seconds he glanced toward the hallway, listening for Zoe's footsteps. Today wasn't just another school trip. It was the day she had spent nearly 2 years dreaming about. Inside the case rested the Beacon Bridge, a compact emergency locator no larger than a hardcover book. Built from inexpensive parts, recycled circuit boards, and countless late nights shared between father and daughter, the device could transmit a distress signal even after conventional cellular networks failed. Zoe often said it wasn't designed to impress judges. It was designed to help people get home alive. Marcus smiled faintly as he closed the case. "I think she'll survive one more airport," he whispered to himself. The refrigerator door opened behind him. 11-year-old Zoe Reed appeared, wearing oversized safety goggles on top of her curly hair and one bright yellow sneaker while searching for the other. "Did you fix it?" Marcus slid the case toward her. "It'll survive being dropped." She raised an eyebrow. "Again? I didn't say that. You were thinking it." "I definitely was." She laughed, the kind of laugh that made the quiet house feel full again. For a brief moment, neither of them noticed the framed photograph sitting beside the coffee maker. Alicia Reed smiled back from the picture, one arm around Marcus, the other wrapped around a much younger Zoe. Someone had tucked a small dried daisy into the corner of the frame weeks earlier. Neither father nor daughter had removed it. Before every important day, Zoe always paused there. She gently touched the frame. "Wish me luck, Mom." Marcus lowered his eyes. He still couldn't answer those moments aloud. 5 years had passed since Alicia died after a highway collision during a violent thunderstorm. The accident itself hadn't killed her immediately. The delayed emergency response had conflicting location data sent rescue crews to the wrong exit, costing precious minutes Marcus still counted in his sleep. That was the day Zoe decided she wanted to build machines that helped rescuers find people faster. That was also the day Marcus quietly stopped talking about the life he had lived before becoming an electronics technician. Zoe zipped her backpack. "You nervous?" Marcus reached for his travel mug. "I've learned airports create enough nervous people without me helping." She studied him carefully. "You're lying. I prefer the phrase carefully managing expectations." She grinned. "That's definitely lying." Their laughter faded as Marcus checked the envelope containing every document for the trip. Driver's license, competition invitation, hotel reservation, boarding passes. He unfolded the tickets once more. First class. He still couldn't believe it. 2 nights earlier, he had called the airline twice after receiving an email announcing the unexpected upgrade. Both representatives had confirmed the reservation was legitimate. Neither could explain why it had happened. Marcus had almost insisted they change it back. Instead, Zoe convinced him to accept it. Maybe someone just wanted to do something nice. Marcus wasn't convinced life worked that way. Kindness usually had a story behind it. He simply hadn't found this one yet. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Silence. Then an older man's voice. Is this Marcus Reed? Rescue Team 9? Marcus's expression changed instantly. He looked toward Zoe, making sure she couldn't hear. You have the wrong person. We've been trying to... Marcus ended the call before the sentence finished. He stared at the screen for several seconds. The number had no caller ID. Zoe noticed. Work? Marcus slipped the phone into his jacket. Wrong number. She knew he wasn't telling the whole truth, but she also knew better than to push him when that distant look appeared in his eyes. Half an hour later, they loaded 2 worn suitcases into Marcus's 12-year-old pickup truck. The engine protested before finally starting. Come on, Marcus muttered. One more trip. The truck answered with another cough before settling into a steady rumble. As Atlanta slowly woke beneath streaks of orange morning light, Zoe rehearsed her presentation from memory. Marcus listened without interrupting. Every time she stumbled over a sentence, she corrected herself before he could help. She reminded him so much of Alicia that it sometimes hurt to breathe. Traffic thickened as Hartwell International Airport appeared ahead, its glass terminals reflecting the rising sun. Zoe pressed her face against the window. I've never flown first class. Marcus smiled. I've barely flown as a passenger. What does that mean? He paused. I used to work around airplanes. What kind of work? Different life. She waited. No answer came. Marcus pulled into the departure lane, instinctively scanning the building. Entrance, emergency exits, security cameras, fire suppression cabinet, ambulance access route. Old habits he had never managed to forget. Zoe noticed him studying everything. You always do that. Do what? Look for every way things can go wrong. Marcus rested a hand on her shoulder. No. He looked across the busy terminal. I look for the fastest way to make sure people get home. She smiled without fully understanding. Together they walked through the sliding glass doors into the crowded terminal. The departure boards glowed overhead. Families hurried toward security. Business travelers rushed past with expensive luggage. For Marcus, it looked like any other airport. For someone else in the building, it was the beginning of a day that had been waiting more than 12 years. Marcus handed their boarding passes to the check-in agent. She scanned the first ticket. Then the second. Her polite smile disappeared. Without returning the boarding passes, she quietly reached for the phone beneath the counter. Could I have a supervisor at counter 12, please? Marcus felt the air around him change. He had seen that look before, and it never ended well. The check-in agent kept her professional smile, but it no longer reached her eyes. I'm sorry, sir, she said softly. Would you mind waiting just a moment? Marcus gave a polite nod. No problem. He stepped aside with Zoe, who hugged the hard-shell project case against her chest. She watched the people flowing through the terminal while trying to ignore the curious glances already drifting toward them. Marcus noticed the stares. He pretended not to. Years of experience had taught him that sometimes silence protected dignity better than arguments. Sometimes, less than a minute later, a woman in a tailored navy blue uniform approached with quick, confident stride. Her name badge read, Vanessa Colli, Gate Operations Supervisor. She offered a practiced smile. Good morning, Mr. Reed? Yes, I'm Vanessa. We've encountered a small issue with your reservation. Marcus remained calm. What kind of issue? Vanessa looked down at the boarding passes before looking back at Marcus's faded work jacket, worn jeans, and scuffed boots. Then her eyes moved toward the 2 weathered suitcases resting beside him. The judgment lasted only a second. Marcus still caught it. I'm afraid your first-class upgrade requires additional verification. I already verified it twice with customer service. I'm sure you did. Her tone stayed pleasant, almost too pleasant, but I'd still like to ask how you received the upgrade. Marcus answered honestly. I don't know. You don't know? No. Did anyone send it to you? Not that I'm aware of. Did you purchase it through a third-party website? No. Use reward points? No. So someone simply upgraded your tickets for free? Apparently. Vanessa folded her arms. That's unusual. Marcus nodded. I thought so too. Behind them, another passenger sighed loudly. Can we keep the line moving? Vanessa smiled toward the waiting customers. We'll just be another minute. She turned back. Would you mind showing me another form of identification? Marcus handed over his driver's license without hesitation. She compared it to the reservation. Everything matched. Name, date of birth, reservation number. Still, she wasn't satisfied. Can I also see the payment confirmation? Marcus unlocked his phone and opened the airline receipt. She studied it carefully. Everything matched again. The amount, the confirmation code, the reservation. Nothing was wrong. Yet something in her expression suggested she had already reached her conclusion. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed." She lowered her voice. "This booking simply doesn't make sense." Marcus looked directly at her. "Because of the ticket?" She hesitated. "Because first-class upgrades like this don't usually happen. They happen this time. They rarely happen without explanation." Marcus nodded once. Then perhaps the airline should explain it. The words were calm, respectful, impossible to argue with. Vanessa felt irritation rise anyway. She had spent nearly 12 years working her way from baggage services to gate supervisor. Promotions depended on avoiding mistakes. Fraudulent tickets happened. Stolen upgrades happened. People lied every day. And standing before her was a man whose appearance did not fit the expensive seat assignment in her system. She hated herself for thinking it, but she thought it anyway. "I'm going to need you to step aside while we investigate." Marcus didn't move. "Are you accusing me of something?" "No." "Then why am I being removed from the line? It's standard procedure." "For what?" She couldn't answer immediately. Nearby conversations slowed. People began watching. Zoe quietly tugged on her father's sleeve. "Dad." Marcus gave her a reassuring smile. "It's okay." A businessman standing several feet away shook his head. "They really need to crack down on people gaming the upgrade system." His companion chuckled. "Happens all the time." Neither man lowered his voice enough. Zoe heard every word. She looked down at her shoes. Marcus heard them too. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Vanessa gestured toward a seating area away from the counter. "Please wait over there." Marcus gathered their luggage. As he walked away, Zoe whispered, "Did we do something wrong?" Marcus crouched until they were eye level. "No." "Then why are they looking at us like that?" He searched for an answer worthy of an 11-year-old. "Sometimes people make decisions before they know the whole story." She frowned. "That's not fair." "No, it isn't." Across the counter, a young baggage employee had been quietly watching everything unfold. His name tag read, Caleb Price. He glanced at the computer screen, still displaying Marcus's reservation. His eyebrows lifted. That wasn't a normal upgrade code. The authorization number began with an executive prefix. He had only seen that once during training. Those codes came directly from airline captains or senior executives. Caleb stepped toward Vanessa. "Excuse me." She didn't look up. "What?" "I think the authorization..." "I'm busy. But the reservation code says..." "I said I'm busy." Caleb swallowed the rest of the sentence. Vanessa picked up the internal phone instead. "This is Supervisor Cole." She paused. "Yes, I need regional operations." Another pause. Her expression became noticeably more serious. "There's a passenger with what appears to be an unauthorized executive upgrade." She listened. "Name?" She looked toward Marcus. "Marcus Reed." Silence. Then, something changed on the other end. Vanessa frowned. "Yes, I'll wait." Several seconds passed. Finally, a man's calm voice came through the receiver. "Grant Halpern, Regional Operations Director. What exactly is the issue?" Vanessa explained the situation. Grant asked one question. "Read me the authorization code." She did. The line went completely silent. Grant stared at his office monitor across the terminal complex. That code, it wasn't fraudulent. He recognized it immediately. It belonged to Captain Daniel Mercer. No captain should have been able to generate that upgrade without executive approval, which meant Mercer had personally requested it. Why? Grant typed Marcus Reed's name into the employee database. No matches. Then into a government contractor registry. Nothing. Then into an archived aviation security contact list. The screen froze for a brief moment. A restricted notation appeared. Access limited. Former Federal Rescue affiliation. Grant's heartbeat quickened. Not because he knew Marcus, because he recognized the classification. And because Flight 702 could not afford unwanted attention today, especially not from someone with rescue experience. His voice hardened. "Hold him." Vanessa blinked. "Sir?" "Confiscate the boarding passes." "On what ground?" "Possible ticket fraud." "But..." "Flag the reservation." She hesitated. "Sir, everything matches. I gave you an instruction." Grant ended the call. Vanessa slowly lowered the receiver. She looked toward Marcus once more, then walked across the terminal. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed." She extended her hand. "I'll need your boarding passes." Marcus didn't move. "Why?" "They're being temporarily confiscated pending investigation." "What investigation?" "Possible fraude." The word landed like a slap. Several nearby passengers turned immediately. Marcus looked directly into her eyes. "Are you saying I forged my tickets?" "I'm saying we need to determine whether they're legitimate." "They're legitimate. I'm afraid that's still under review." Marcus reached into his backpack. Without raising his voice, He removed printed receipts, email confirmation, credit card statements, everything neatly organized in transparent folders. I keep copies of everything. He handed them over. You'll find the same reservation number on every document. Vanessa flipped through the pages. Every date matched. Every payment matched. Every record matched. There was nothing suspicious. Nothing. And yet Grant's order echoed in her mind. Hold him. Before she could respond, Zoe quietly lifted her tablet. She pressed one button, recording. Marcus noticed. He didn't stop her. He had taught her something after her mother's accident. When something important happens, he once said, "Don't argue first. Document first." Vanessa looked up from the paperwork. "I'm afraid you'll have to remain here until regional operations arrive." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'll wait." His voice remained steady. His eyes did not. Far across the terminal, the doors to the executive corridor opened. A tall man in an expensive charcoal suit stepped into view. Grant Halpern. He walked confidently toward the counter. Then he saw Marcus's face. For the briefest moment, his confidence vanished, almost imperceptibly, as though he recognized not the man, but the danger the man represented. Grant stopped beside Vanessa. Without taking his eyes off Marcus, he spoke quietly. "Call airport security." Then, just loud enough for Marcus to hear, he added, "Escort Mr. Reed away from the first-class area." Two uniformed airport security officers approached without rushing. They weren't aggressive. Not yet. "Mr. Reed?" the older officer asked. Marcus looked at him calmly. "Yes. We'd appreciate it if you'd come with us." Marcus glanced toward Zoe before answering. "Am I being detained?" "No, sir." "Am I free to leave?" The officer hesitated. "I'd rather not answer that here." Marcus had heard that response before. It usually meant the situation was already becoming something else. He picked up the suitcases with one hand, while Zoe clutched the Beacon Bridge case against her chest. "We'll cooperate." Grant nodded with quiet satisfaction. "Good." The walk through the terminal felt far longer than it really was. Passengers whispered as Marcus passed. Some assumed he had tried to board with a fake ticket. Others assumed something worse. No one asked him what had actually happened. Zoe kept her eyes on the floor. Marcus wished more than anything that she didn't have to learn how quickly strangers could write an entire story about someone they had never met. The officers escorted them into a secondary screening room tucked beside the gate. Glass walls allowed employees outside to see inside, but conversations remained private. Grant entered a moment later. Vanessa followed, carrying the folder of Marcus's document. Everything Marcus had provided sat untouched on top. Not a single inconsistency had been found. Grant didn't even look at them. "Mr. Reed," he began, folding his hands together, "this is simply a precaution." Marcus remained standing. "A precaution against what?" "There are irregularities associated with your reservation. You've verified my identification." "Yes." "You've verified payment." "Yes." "You've verified the reservation." "Yes." Marcus waited. Grant offered nothing more. "So what's irregular?" Grant smiled politely. "The circumstances." Marcus almost laughed. "The circumstances? Sometimes unusual reservations require additional review." "Unusual doesn't mean fraudulent." "No." "Then why am I being treated like one?" Grant's smile became thinner. "We're only trying to protect the airline," Marcus answered quietly. "And who protects the passengers?" For the first time, Grant's expression stiffened. The room fell silent. Before either man spoke again, a sharp electronic chirp came from Zoe's project case. "Beep, beep, beep." She frowned. "That's weird." Marcus turned immediately. "What happened?" "I didn't even turn it on." She carefully opened the protective case. The Beacon Bridge's small display had illuminated by itself. Several lines of scrolling diagnostic information moved rapidly across the screen. Marcus leaned closer. His relaxed posture disappeared. The signal graph wasn't searching for ordinary cellular frequencies. It had locked onto something much stronger, something encrypted. Zoe looked confused. "It's detecting an emergency transmission." Marcus frowned. "From where?" She rotated the small directional antenna. The signal strength doubled, then tripled. The arrow pointed directly toward the jet bridge, connected to Flight 702. Marcus's breathing slowed. He stared at the waveform. The pulse pattern looked painfully familiar. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. Not random interference, a repeating dropout, a heartbeat with missing beats. He whispered almost to himself, "No." Grant looked irritated. "What exactly is that device?" Zoe answered proudly. "It's called Beacon Bridge." Marcus interrupted gently. "Zoo, She looked at him. He never interrupted her when she talked about her invention. Not unless something was seriously wrong. Marcus studied the screen another few seconds. Then he looked toward the terminal windows where Flight 702 sat waiting beneath the morning sun. When was the aircraft's emergency locator system serviced? Grant blinked. What? The aircraft. Marcus's voice became firmer. When was the emergency locator module replaced? Grant stared at him. I don't see how that's any of your concern. Marcus ignored the question. Has maintenance been working on that airplane this morning? Grant's patience disappeared. Mr. Reed, you're here because of your ticket. No. Marcus slowly pointed toward the blinking display. I'm here because something out there is transmitting a fault pattern it shouldn't be transmitting. Grant crossed his arm. You have absolutely no authority to evaluate our aircraft. I didn't evaluate it. Marcus held up the screen. It identified itself. Outside the room, a woman carrying a maintenance tablet slowed her pace. She had heard the last sentence through the partially open doorway. Her badge read, Elena Park, Airport Systems Analyst. She stopped just long enough to glance at the Beacon Bridge display. Then her eyes widened. She quietly stepped inside. May I see that? Grant turned immediately. No. Elena ignored him. Instead, she looked directly at Marcus. Where did you learn to recognize that signal pattern? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked one question. Have you reported intermittent emergency locator failures in the last week? Elena's expression changed completely. Yes. Grant stepped between them. This conversation is over. Elena looked at him. No, it isn't. She turned back toward Marcus. We logged 3 intermittent synchronization failures. Marcus nodded once. Were they ever repaired? Elena hesitated. The report says they were. Were they? Silence. Finally, she admitted. No. Grant's voice hardened. Elena, my team never signed off on the repairs. That's enough. I've still got the original diagnostics. No. You don't. Grant smiled without warmth. They were closed yesterday. Elena stared at him. I didn't close them. They're closed now. Marcus watched the exchange carefully. He wasn't looking at their faces anymore. He was watching what they weren't saying. People lying about technical problems often made the same mistake. They argued over paperwork. Instead of equipment, his eyes drifted through the glass wall toward the ramp outside. A maintenance vehicle rolled beneath Flight 702. A contractor climbed down carrying a gray equipment case. The logo on the side caught Marcus's attention. A silver hawk inside a blue triangle. For an instant, the sounds of the airport disappeared. Sand, smoke, rotor blades, a burning aircraft. The same symbol had once been painted on shipping containers stacked beside military communication equipment halfway around the world. Marcus whispered the name before he realized it. Pike. The contractor disappeared beneath the aircraft. Marcus's jaw tightened. Grant noticed. What is it? Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he watched another worker scan a restricted access badge before entering a service hat. The badge flashed green. No escort. No airport employee accompanying him. That violated standard procedures. Marcus looked back toward Grant. Those contractors, what about them? They're entering restricted maintenance areas alone. They're authorized. They're unsupervised. Grant shrugged. They know what they're doing. Marcus held his gaze. So did the last people who said that. Before Grant could respond, another security officer entered carrying a property envelope. We'll need his phone. Grant nodded. And the tablet. Zoe instinctively hugged the project case tighter. Marcus stepped between her and the officer. The phone belongs to me. And the tablet? My daughter. We'll need both. For what reason? They may contain evidence. Marcus remained perfectly still. Evidence of what? No answer. The officer simply extended his hand again. Marcus slowly handed over his phone. Then he looked at Zoe. She reluctantly surrendered her tablet. But when the officer reached toward the Beacon Bridge case, Marcus's hand stopped him. No. The officer frowned. Sir, that's not evidence. It's being held with the rest. It's a competition project. Grant spoke coldly. If you're innocent, you'll get it back. Marcus looked directly into his eyes. If she loses that project, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The room filled with an uncomfortable silence. Outside the glass walls, more passengers had begun gathering near the gate. Some pointed toward the screening room. Others filmed through the windows. Grant noticed immediately. Public attention. Exactly what he didn't want. He leaned toward Marcus. Quiet enough that only Marcus could hear. You're making this much harder than it has to be. Marcus answered just as quietly. No. His eyes never left Flight 702. The airplane is, at that exact moment, across the ramp, a red maintenance warning illuminated beneath the cockpit windshield. One sharp flash, then another. It remained on for 3 full seconds. Elena saw it too, so that's why. Before she could finish, Grant reached into his pocket, unlocked his phone, and sent a message. Almost instantly, the warning light disappeared. A few seconds later, Elena's work tablet vibrated. She looked down. The maintenance alert had been marked. Fault resolved. She stared at the screen in disbelief. No technician had touched the aircraft. No repair had been completed. Someone had simply closed the report. Elena slowly raised her eyes to Grant. Marcus saw the same thing. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to, because both now understood the truth. Someone wasn't trying to solve the problem. Someone was trying to erase it. Marcus couldn't take his eyes off Elena's tablet. Fault resolved. 2 words. No technician had climbed aboard the aircraft. No replacement parts had been installed. No diagnostic cycle had been completed. Yet somehow the system now claimed the problem no longer existed. Elena looked as though someone had struck her. "I never signed this," she whispered. Grant slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Computer systems update automatically." "No, they don't. They do today." Their eyes met. Neither blinked. Marcus recognized the moment immediately. Not because of airports, because he had seen the exact same kind of conversation years earlier when paperwork became more important than people. Grant finally broke the silence. "Mr. Reed, I believe this discussion has gone far enough," Marcus answered calmly. "I disagree. You've made several assumptions. I've made observations, based on equipment you don't understand." Marcus almost smiled. "If I didn't understand it, I wouldn't have noticed it." Grant took one slow step closer. "What exactly do you do for a living?" "I repair emergency communication system." "For airports?" "For anyone whose radios have to work when people's lives depend on them." Grant folded his arms. "So you're not an aviation engineer?" "No." "Not employed by the FAA?" "No." "Not authorized to inspect aircraft?" "No." Grant spread his hands. "Then perhaps we should leave aviation decisions to aviation professionals." Marcus looked through the window toward Flight 702. "I'd love to." He paused. If they were making them, Grant's jaw tightened. Before another word could be exchanged, one of the security officers stepped outside to answer a radio call, leaving Marcus, Zoe, Elena, Vanessa, and Grant alone in the room. The silence gave Marcus exactly what he hadn't wanted. Time to think. His eyes drifted once more to the contractor's logo he had seen beneath the aircraft. The Silver Hawk, Pike. The name echoed somewhere deep inside, memories he spent years trying to bury. Without warning, the airport around him faded. 12 years earlier, northern Afghanistan. A moonless night. Wind screamed across broken mountains as sand hammered against a military transport aircraft lying half buried in rock. The emergency locator signal flickered. On. Off. On. Off. Every interruption stole precious seconds. Marcus Reed, then a staff sergeant with Rescue Team 9, crouched behind shattered metal while checking the handheld locator clipped to his vest. "No lock," Isaiah Brooks shouted through the radio. Marcus adjusted the antenna. "Try again." "Nothing. Only static." Inside the burning transport, frightened civilians pounded desperately against twisted metal. Captain Daniel Mercer was trapped in the cockpit, bleeding heavily. Enemy fire echoed across the valley. Command's voice burst through Marcus's headset. "Rescue Team 9, withdraw immediately." Marcus ignored it. "Isaiah, I'm moving to the rear compartment. There are still civilians inside." "I know." Marcus forced open the cockpit with a hydraulic spreader. Smoke poured into his face. Daniel Mercer could barely breathe. "Leave me," the pilot whispered. Marcus answered with the same words he always used. "Not today." He lifted the unconscious pilot onto his shoulders. Outside, Isaiah had already guided several terrified civilians toward the extraction zone. One little girl refused to leave without her grandmother. Isaiah turned back. Marcus shouted through the radio, "Don't." Static swallowed the warning. The locator signal failed again. 1. Tfo. Hause. Exactly the same pattern Marcus had seen minutes earlier inside Hartwell International Airport. The helicopter arrived. Marcus loaded Daniel aboard, loaded the civilian, counted heads, 23 survivors. Then, he looked around. "Where's Isaiah?" No answer. Marcus grabbed another radio. "Isaiah, respond." Nothing. Only wind, only static, only silence. He ran back toward the burning wreckage. Another explosion threw him to the ground. By the time another rescue team reached Isaiah's position, it was too late. Marcus blinked. The airport returned. His breathing had become slightly uneven. Zoe noticed immediately. "Dad?" He looked at her. She had only seen that expression once before, at her mother's funeral. "I'm okay." She didn't believe him, not completely. Elena quietly watched Marcus. Whatever memories had crossed his face, they weren't ordinary. She spoke gently. "You've seen that signal before." Marcus remained silent. Grant answered for him. "It doesn't matter." Marcus looked at Grant. "It matters." Grant Sahil. "We're discussing an airport maintenance issue." "No." Marcus's voice remained low. "We're discussing whether people trust paperwork more than equipment." Vanessa glanced between the two men. Until now, she had assumed Grant simply wanted to protect airline procedures. Now, she wasn't so sure. Marcus slowly sat beside Zoe. She leaned closer. "You've never told me why you know so much about airplane." He stared at his hands that had once pulled strangers from burning aircraft, hands that had failed to save his best friend. Finally, he spoke. "I used to rescue people." Zoe waited. "When?" "A long time ago. In the military?" Marcus nodded. "You never told me. I didn't want those stories becoming yours." She looked confused. "Why not?" "Because some stories don't end." Silence settled between them. Then Zoe quietly asked the question Marcus had feared for years. "Did someone die?" His eyes closed briefly. "Yes." "Someone you loved?" Another nod. "My best friend." She reached over and held his hand without saying anything else. Marcus squeezed it gently. After a long moment, he continued, "People called me a hero after that mission. Weren't you?" "I don't know." "You saved people." "I couldn't save everyone." He looked through the glass toward the airplane. "I kept thinking if I'd moved faster, if I'd ignored one order sooner, if I'd heard one radio transmission." Zoe interrupted him. "Dad." Marcus looked down. "You always tell me engineers don't build perfect machines." "They don't. They build better ones." Marcus frowned slightly. So maybe heroes aren't people who save everybody." She smiled sadly. "Maybe they're the people who never stopped trying after they couldn't." Marcus felt something tighten inside his chest. For years, generals, politicians, reporters had all tried to define what happened that night. None had explained it as simply or as truthfully as his 11-year-old daughter. Across the room, Helena quietly opened a secure folder on her tablet. "I probably shouldn't show you this." Grant looked up immediately. "Elena." She ignored him. The screen displayed several maintenance logs from the previous week, rows of technical data, diagnostic timestamps, fault histories. Marcus leaned closer. His expression changed. He didn't need to read every line. One code was enough. LQ 117A. His heartbeat slowed. "No." Elena looked at him. "You recognize it?" Marcus barely whispered. "I'll never forget it." Grant stepped forward. "Close that file." Neither of them moved. Marcus pointed at the code. 12 years ago. He swallowed. "That exact failure signature appeared in the communication module used during my team's rescue mission." Elena stared at him. "It can't be." Marcus looked into her eyes. "It is." She zoomed in on the manufacturer information. A familiar logo appeared beside the serial data. Pike Aeronautic Systems. Marcus's face turned pale. "So it wasn't just bad luck." Elena frowned. "What?" Marcus's voice was almost inaudible. "My friend." He looked back toward Flight 702. "He may have died because of the same defect." The room became perfectly still. No one noticed that Grant had quietly taken one step backward, or that, beneath the sleeve of his expensive suit, his hand had begun to tremble. Grant quickly hid the tremor in his hand by straightening his suit jacket. "That's enough," he said, his voice firm again. "This conversation is over." Elena didn't lower her tablet. "It shouldn't be." "It is." "You altered a maintenance record. I authorized an administrative update. You marked a critical fault as repaired. I marked it according to the information I received." "You received it from who?" Grant's eyes hardened. "Be careful, Elena." The warning hung in the room. Marcus watched without speaking. He had learned years ago that when someone stopped defending facts and started threatening people, the facts were usually winning. Elena took a slow breath. "My team inspected Flight 7023 times this week." Grant said nothing. "We reported intermittent failures in the emergency locator synchronization module." Still nothing. "We requested that the aircraft remain grounded until replacement parts arrive." Grant folded his arms, and the aircraft passed every required operational inspection. "It passed because someone closed our reports before we completed them." Grant stepped closer. "You should think very carefully before accusing regional operations of misconduct." "I'm accusing the data," Marcus finally spoke, "and data doesn't care about job titles." Grant turned toward him. "I've tolerated your interference long enough." Marcus met his stare without flinching. "I'm not interfering. You've delayed a commercial flight. I haven't touched the airplane. You've questioned certified professionals. I questioned a blinking warning light." Grant's patience snapped. "You don't belong here." The words echoed louder than he intended. For a brief second, even Vanessa looked uncomfortable. Marcus answered quietly, "No." I belong exactly where my daughter belonged." He looked at Zoe, waiting for the truth. 20 minutes later, Marcus and Zoe were escorted into a private waiting area near the gate, while Grant held a series of hurried phone calls behind closed doors. Outside the glass walls, Flight 702 remained connected to the jet bridge. Passengers had begun asking why boarding had stopped. Rumors spread quickly. Mechanical issue, weather delay, security concern. No one knew the truth. Inside the waiting room, Zoe sat beside her project case, silently tracing circles across the plastic handle. Marcus noticed. "You okay?" She nodded automatically. "No." He smiled faintly. "That's a better answer." She looked at him. "If we miss registration." Her voice faded. Marcus knew exactly what she wasn't saying. Months of preparation, late nights, science fair, scholarship opportunities. All of it depended on reaching Denver before evening. He sat beside her. "I'm sorry. You didn't do anything. I brought us here. You also taught me not to ignore problems." She forced a smile. "I'm just wishing those lessons had better timing." Marcus chuckled softly. "I've wished that a few times myself." The door opened. Elena stepped inside after checking the hallway. She carried no tablet now, only a folded sheet of paper. "I printed this before my system access disappeared." Marcus accepted it. It was a maintenance log, several pages long. Most of the information looked ordinary. Then he noticed a serial number. His expression changed. "This module," Elena nodded. "It was installed 6 days ago." Marcus read farther. "It can't be." "What?" "This serial number was retired years ago." Elena looked surprised. "You know that?" Marcus pointed at the page. The numbering format changed after a military recall. "You've seen those records before?" "I've seen enough." He flipped another page. The replacement module supposedly came from Pike Aeronautic, manufactured 3 years earlier. Marcus quietly shook his head. "No." Elena leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "This unit wasn't manufactured 3 years ago." "Then when?" Marcus looked directly at her. "At least 12. Silence settled over the room. Finally, Elena whispered, "That's impossible." Marcus slid the paper back toward her. "Not impossible. Illegal." The realization drained the color from her face. "If you're right, I am. Someone installed obsolete emergency equipment on a passenger aircraft." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. Both of them already knew. The door opened again. Grant entered carrying a thin envelope. His expression had returned to calm professionalism. "Mr. Reed." Marcus stood. "I've spoken with corporate." Grant placed the envelope on the table. "We'd like to resolve this misunderstanding." Marcus opened it. Inside were 2 economy-class boarding passes for a later evening flight, a printed travel voucher, and a letter. He read the first paragraph, then the second. Finally, he looked up. "You want me to sign this?" Grant smiled politely. "It simply states there was confusion regarding your reservation." Marcus continued reading. It also stated that Marcus acknowledged airline personnel had acted appropriately, that no discrimination had occurred, that operational delays resulted from passenger misunderstanding. At the bottom of the page, a compensation offer, $5,000 in future travel credit. Marcus looked back at Grant. "You think this fixes it?" "It allows everyone to move forward." "It allows you to move forward." Grant didn't deny it. "You'll still reach Denver tonight. The competition begins this afternoon." "I'm afraid that's unavoidable." Marcus looked at Zoe. She hadn't said a word. Grant continued. $5,000 in travel credit. Marcus folded the document. "My daughter doesn't need travel credit." Grant's smile weakened. "You'll also receive a full refund." Marcus remained silent. Grant lowered his voice. "You've worked hard for this trip." Marcus said nothing. "I imagine replacing an opportunity like this isn't easy." Still nothing. "So ask yourself," Grant leaned closer, "is proving a point really worth costing your daughter her future?" The room became very quiet. Marcus looked at Zoe. He saw the hope in her eyes, the disappointment she was trying desperately to hide. For one painful second, he considered signing, not because Grant deserved it, because Zoe deserved better than another sacrifice made in the name of principle. He picked up the pen. Zoe watched him. Grant relaxed for the first time all morning. Marcus uncapped the pen. His hand hovered above the signature line. Then, "Dad." He looked at Zoe. She slowly pushed the paper away. "If the airplane really isn't safe." Marcus remained silent. "Then somebody else's dad is sitting out there." She looked toward the gate. "Or somebody else's little girl." Grant interrupted. "The aircraft has been cleared." Zoe shook her head. "No." She looked directly at Marcus. You always tell me that facts matter more than promises. Marcus stared at her. His fingers slowly released the pen. He folded the agreement in half, then in half again. Finally, he handed it back. I'm not signing. Grant's face hardened. You should reconsider. I already did. Grant collected the papers without another word. As he turned toward the door, it opened again. A young man hurried inside, breathing heavily. Caleb. He looked terrified. I found something. Grant stopped walking. Caleb glanced nervously at him before looking at Marcus. This morning, he swallowed. I helped unload replacement equipment. Marcus waited. There was a communication module. So, I checked the paperwork because the numbers looked familiar. He reached into his pocket. I took a picture. Grant's expression changed instantly. Caleb unlocked his phone with shaking hands and showed Marcus the image. A close-up of the module's identification plate. Marcus zoomed in. The serial number matched the maintenance log. Below it was another marking, a disposal stamp. Scrapped. U.S. government property. Marcus looked up sharply. This module was supposed to be destroyed. Elena stared at the screen. May God. Grant stepped forward. Give me the phone. Caleb instinctively stepped backward. No. Company policy. No. No. Grant's voice became cold. That's airline property. It's my phone. It contains confidential maintenance information. It contains the truth. Grant nodded once toward the security officer standing outside the room. Within seconds, the officer entered. Grant pointed directly at Caleb. Confiscate the device. Caleb tightened his grip. Marcus stepped between them. No. The officer hesitated. Grant's voice rose. That photograph is unauthorized. Marcus looked calmly at the young baggage handler. Can you send it? Caleb nodded. I already tried. Did it go through? Caleb's face fell. He looked at the screen. No. There isn't any signal. Grant smiled for the first time in several minutes. Then he turned to the officer. Take the phone. The officer reached toward Caleb. At that exact moment, the screen went black. Not because the battery died, because someone, somewhere inside the airport network, had remotely disabled it. The screen went black. Caleb stared at his phone in disbelief. No, that's impossible. He pressed the power button again. Nothing. He tried connecting it to a charger from his backpack. Still nothing. Grant didn't bother hiding the satisfaction in his eye. Looks like your battery chose a very unfortunate moment. Caleb looked ready to panic. It had 93%. Grant shrugged. Electronics failed. Marcus watched Grant instead of the phone. People who had nothing to hide rarely looked relieved when evidence disappeared. Security escorted Caleb into the hallway while the young baggage handler protested that the phone had been working only seconds earlier. Marcus wanted to follow, but another officer stepped into his path. You'll stay here, sir. Marcus nodded. I'm staying. His eyes drifted back toward Flight 702. The aircraft still hadn't moved. That meant someone inside the cockpit hadn't approved departure. Grant checked his watch. His patience was evaporating. He pulled Vanessa aside. Board the remaining passengers. She blinked. Without clearing Mr. Reed's reservation, I'll handle Reed. And the maintenance issue? There isn't one. Vanessa lowered her voice. The warning light? I said there isn't one. She hesitated. Grant leaned closer. I need you to trust my judgment. Vanessa forced herself to nod, but something no longer felt right. During her 12 years with Meridian Crown Airlines, she had watched hundreds of delays unfold. Mechanical failures, medical emergencies, weather diversions. Grant had always insisted on documentation. Today, he seemed determined to avoid it. She walked toward the gate podium with a growing knot in her stomach. Minutes later, boarding resumed. Families lined up. Business travelers checked their watches. Children pulled colorful suitcases behind them. Everything looked normal. Only Marcus noticed that two Pike Aeronautics contractors quietly emerged from beneath the aircraft carrying an empty equipment case. Empty. That bothered him more than if it had been full. He whispered almost to himself. They swapped something. Elena heard him. So did I. Before either could continue, the public address system chimed. Final boarding call for Meridian Crown Flight 702 to Denver. Passengers began disappearing down the jet bridge. Marcus felt his chest tighten. If he was right, every step they took carried them closer to unnecessary danger. He turned toward Grant. Ground the airplane. Grant didn't even look up from his tablet. The aircraft has been inspected. By who? Our certified technicians. Marcus shook his head. No. They changed paperwork. They didn't change the problem. Grant finally met his eyes. You don't know that. Marcus answered quietly. I know enough. Grant sighed. I'm done discussing this. He turned toward security. Escort Mr. Reed and his daughter out of the secured boarding area. Before anyone moved, the cockpit door of Flight 702 opened. A tall pilot stepped onto the jet bridge. Captain Daniel Mercer had been reviewing departure paperwork when he noticed a delay code he didn't recognize. The gate agent had mentioned a disruptive passenger whose name had triggered unusual executive communications. He almost ignored it. Then he heard the name again, Marcus Reed. For a heartbeat, time stopped. It couldn't be. 12 years. No interview, no ceremonies, no military reunion. The man who had carried him through fire had disappeared from public life. Daniel walked quickly through the jet bridge and entered the terminal. His first glimpse of Marcus erased every remaining doubt. The same steady posture, the same scar above his right eyebrow. Older, more tired, but unmistakably him. Marcus looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded gate. Daniel froze. Passengers continued walking around him, unaware that two men separated by more than a decade of silence were seeing one another again. Without saying a word, Daniel slowly removed his captain's cap. The conversations around gate 42 began fading. He stood perfectly straight, then raised his right hand, a flawless military salute. The terminal became silent. Even the gate scanner stopped beeping as passengers turned toward the unexpected scene. Vanessa looked from the captain to Marcus, completely confused. Grant's face lost its color. Marcus didn't move, not immediately. For several long seconds, he simply looked at Daniel. Images flashed through his mind. Smoke, sand, rotor blades, a blood-covered pilot whispering, "Leave me." Marcus slowly lifted his own hand. He returned the salute, not proudly, not dramatically, quietly, like a promise remembered. Daniel lowered his hand first. His voice was calm. "I've been trying to find you." Marcus offered a tired smile. "I wasn't trying to be found." Daniel took 2 steps closer. "You disappeared after the investigation. I had reason. I know." Daniel looked at Zoe. "And this must be my daughter." Zoe smiled nervously. "I'm Zoo." Daniel's expression softened. "Your father once carried me nearly half a mile through enemy fire." Marcus immediately interrupted. Daniel, the captain, understood. Marcus still didn't want the story told. Daniel respected that. He turned instead toward Vanessa. "The first-class upgrade." Vanessa nodded uncertainly. "Yes, Captain? I authorized it." Her eyes widened. "You? Personally?" "Yes. I don't understand. I recognized Mr. Reed's name on yesterday's passenger list." Daniel smiled faintly at Marcus. "I wasn't entirely sure until now." Vanessa looked from one man to the other. "So, the reservation is legitimate. The executive authorization code. Mine." She felt the blood drain from her face. Everything she had assumed, every question, every suspicious glance, every humiliating delay, all of it had been based on an assumption she never should have made. She turned toward Marcus. The apology wouldn't come. Not yet. Grant stepped forward before she could speak. "Captain Mercer, regardless of your personal history with this passenger, operational procedures remain in effect." Daniel faced him calmly. "I've confirmed the ticket. That issue has been resolved." "Good." Daniel started back toward the aircraft. Marcus stopped him. "Daniel." The captain turned. Marcus spoke quietly enough that only those nearest could hear. "Have you had any unexpected emergency locator resets this morning?" Daniel's expression changed instantly. "Twice." Grant's heartbeat stumbled. Daniel continued. "They disappeared before maintenance finished reviewing them." Marcus nodded once. "I thought so." Daniel stepped closer. "How did you know?" Marcus looked toward the aircraft. "I've seen that fault before. Elena joined them." "So have I." She showed Daniel the printed maintenance log. He scanned the page. His expression darkened. "I never received this." "You weren't supposed to," Grant answered. Everyone looked at him. Grant quickly corrected himself. "I mean, maintenance handles those reports before they reach flight crews." Daniel folded the paper. "I'm not boarding until engineering explains this." Grant's voice sharpened. "Captain, every required inspection has been completed." Daniel didn't raise his voice. "I said I'm not boarding. You'll delay 187 passengers. I'd rather delay them on the ground than explain them in the air." The words echoed through the gate. Passengers began whispering again. Some reached for their phones. Grant could almost see headlines forming. "Flight delayed. Captain refuses departure. Safety concerns." This couldn't happen. Not today. Not with Pike's executives expecting confirmation that the replacement modules had entered service without incident. Grant leaned closer to Daniel. "Think carefully. I already have. This delay will affect your promotion." Daniel smiled sadly. "I stopped flying for promotions a long time ago." He looked back at Marcus. "I owe my life to a man who never ignored a warning." Then he turned toward the gate microphone. "Flight 702 will remain at the gate pending further technical inspection. Gasps spread through the waiting area. Passengers erupted into question. Grant stood frozen. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and unlocked his phone. He opened a secure messaging application. One contact, Raymond Pike. His fingers moved quickly. Reed identified the module. Mercer grounded the flight. We have a problem. Less than 10 seconds later, the reply appeared. Grant read it once, then again. His stomach tightened. Remove the module before federal inspectors arrive. Make Reed responsible for the delay. Grant looked up. Across the terminal, Marcus was kneeling beside Zoe, reassuring her that everything would be all right. Grant knew one thing with absolute certainty. If Marcus Reed stayed in that airport much longer, everything Grant had spent years building was about to collapse. The announcement spread through Hartwell International faster than any boarding call. Flight 702 has been temporarily delayed. Passenger Sahil. Some complained. Others demanded hotel vouchers before the delay had even reached 10 minutes. Very few realized that a captain had just refused to fly his own aircraft. Grant Halpern stepped away from the gate with controlled urgency, but the confidence he had worn all morning was beginning to crack. His phone rang almost immediately. Raymond Pike. Grant answered without greeting him. I received your message. Raymond's voice was cold. Then why is the airplane still sitting there? Mercer grounded it. I don't care who grounded it. You should. No, Grant, you should. Grant glanced around before lowering his voice. Federal inspectors haven't been called yet. They will be. I can still contain this. You'd better. The line went dead. Grant stared at the screen for a moment before making another decision, one that had nothing to do with safety, everything to do with survival. Within 15 minutes, airport information screens quietly changed. The official reason for the delay now read, passenger security incident under review. Marcus noticed it first. He looked at the monitor, then at Grant. Grant didn't even bother pretending it was an accident. Zoe read the screen aloud. Passenger security incident? She looked at her father. They mean us. Marcus nodded slowly. Yes, but that's not true. No. Then why would they write it? Marcus didn't answer immediately, because he knew exactly why. People believed official signs, official reports, official statements, long before they believed ordinary people. Nearby, passengers had already begun whispering again. That's him. I knew something wasn't right. I heard he tried getting into the cockpit. I heard he had fake credentials. Someone even pointed toward Zoe. Poor kid. Marcus heard every word. He kept his face calm. Not for himself. For here. Captain Mercer returned from operations carrying several maintenance requests. His expression darkened as he looked at the departure monitor. Passenger security incident? Marcus nodded toward it. They're building a story. Daniel quietly folded the paperwork. They're building the wrong one. Across the terminal, television monitors inside an airport cafe began displaying local breaking news. A reporter stood outside Hartwell International. Sources tell us an unidentified passenger caused significant disruption aboard Meridian Crown Flight 702 this morning. Marcus watched silently. The footage showed only one thing: security officers escorting him away from the check-in counter. None of the conversation, none of the warning light, none of Captain Mercer's salute, just Marcus. The implication was obvious. Zoe's shoulders slowly dropped. They think you're the bad guy. Marcus looked at the television. For now, she swallowed. Doesn't that bother you? It does. Then why aren't you angry? Marcus looked at his daughter. I am. You don't look angry. I've learned anger and action aren't the same thing. She considered that quietly. Her phone vibrated. A message from the National Young Innovators Championship. Registration close in 58 minutes. Another message followed. Late arrivals cannot be accommodated. She locked the screen before Marcus could read it. He had already seen. His heart sank. For nearly 2 years, she had worked toward this day. Every weekend, every science fair, every failed prototype, every late-night soldering session. Now, because he refused to ignore a dangerous aircraft, she was losing everything she had earned. Marcus quietly looked away. The guilt settled heavily across his shoulder. Meanwhile, Grant walked briskly toward a restricted maintenance corridor. 2 Pike Aeronautics contractors waited beside a locked service door. One carried a gray equipment case. The other carried electronic diagnostic tools. Grant spoke quickly. The captain grounded the aircraft. We know. Federal inspectors may arrive. We know. The defective module has to disappear. The older contractor nodded. We'll replace it. No. Grant shook his head. You'll erase every record that it was ever installed. The contractor hesitated. That's harder. I didn't ask. The man opened the equipment case. Inside sat another emergency locator module, new serial number, fresh inspection label, clean paperwork. Grant frowned. Does it work? The contractor answered after a brief pause. It'll pass inspection. That's not what I asked. Another pause. It works well enough. Grant closed the case himself. Make sure nobody sees you. Elena had seen enough. From a distance, she watched the contractors disappear beneath Flight 702 with the replacement equipment. She hurried back toward Marcus. They're changing the module. Marcus stood immediately. We have to stop them. Captain Mercer nodded. I'm coming. The three of them headed toward the maintenance access corridor. They had taken barely 20 steps before two airport security officers blocked the hallway. Restricted area. Marcus stopped. The aircraft is being altered. It's under authorized maintenance, not authorized by engineering. The officer remained expressionless. Please return to the gate. Daniel stepped forward. I'm the captain assigned to that aircraft. The younger officer shifted uneasily. Grant appeared almost immediately. Captain Mercer. Daniel looked at him. I want visual confirmation of the replacement. Maintenance is handling it. I'll decide when maintenance is complete. Grant shook his head. You're temporarily relieved of operational authority pending administrative review. Daniel stared at him. You suspended me? Until this matter is resolved. Marcus understood exactly what Grant was doing. Remove anyone who could challenge the paperwork. First, Elena. Now Daniel. Grant turned toward Marcus. And you. Marcus waited. You are no longer permitted anywhere near Flight 702. Why? Because you've interfered with airport operations. Marcus almost laughed. I've asked questions. You've delayed a commercial aircraft. I didn't ground it. No. Grant looked toward Daniel. He did. Daniel smiled faintly. I'd do it again. Less than 30 minutes later, Caleb was escorted from the employee entrance carrying a cardboard box filled with his belongings. His security badge had already been disabled. As he crossed the parking lot, his phone finally powered back on. The first thing he checked, cloud backup. His photograph had uploaded. At nio, 14 am. Nearly 40 minutes before the phone went dark. A relieved smile spread across his face. They didn't get it. He immediately attempted to call Marcus. The call never connected. Grant had already blocked communications inside the temporary investigation area. Inside the terminal, Vanessa sat alone behind the gate desk. In front of her rested a typed incident report. Passenger attempted unauthorized access toward restricted aircraft area. Below it, a signature line. Grant stood beside her. Sign it. Vanessa read every word. It isn't accurate. It summarizes the situation. It says he attempted to breach security. He questioned maintenance. That's not the same thing. Grant's voice became colder. Sign it. Vanessa stared at the paper. Her younger brother depended on the health insurance provided by this job. His kidney treatments weren't optional. Losing employment wasn't merely inconvenient. It was terrifying. Slowly, almost painfully, she signed her name. The ink had barely dried before regret settled inside her chest. Back in the waiting area, Marcus sat beside Zoe. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Zoe broke the silence. Did we lose? Marcus looked at her. I don't know. I think we did. She held the Beacon Bridge case tightly against her chest. I wanted Mom to be proud today. Marcus swallowed hard. She already would be. I didn't even get to show anyone. Marcus looked toward the aircraft. No. You showed the right people. She frowned. They don't believe us. Marcus didn't answer. Because right now, she was right. A security officer entered the room. Federal aviation inspectors are here. Grant smiled politely. Excellent. Marcus stood. Maybe now. Finally, the truth would matter. The inspectors spent nearly 40 minutes examining Flight 702. They reviewed maintenance log. They scanned the newly installed emergency locator module. They questioned technicians. Then they returned to the terminal. The lead inspector approached Grant. We found no active fault. Grant nodded sadly, as though disappointed by the inconvenience. I appreciate your thoroughness. The inspector turned toward Marcus. Sir. Marcus waited. At this time, we have no evidence supporting your concern. Marcus looked at Elena. She looked devastated. Grant looked victorious. The aircraft had been cleaned. The records had been rewritten. The defective module was gone. Every visible piece of evidence had vanished. Grant turned toward the departure board. Flight 702 will depart under a replacement flight crew. Captain Mercer lowered his head. Marcus closed his eyes. For the first time all day, he wondered if he had made the wrong choice. Beside him, Zoe quietly opened the Beacon Bridge case. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She simply wanted to turn it off. Instead, a small notification appeared across the screen. Automatic signal archive complete. She frowned. What does that mean? Marcus opened his eyes. What did you say? Zoe rotated the screen toward him. The beacon bridge saved something. Marcus stared at the display, then at the timestamp. 9:02 a.m. Exactly when Flight 702's emergency locator had begun malfunctioning. His pulse quickened. Zoop. She looked up. I think your invention just recorded the one thing they forgot to erase. Marcus took the beacon bridge from Zoe with both hands, as if he were holding something fragile enough to change the course of the entire day. What exactly did it save? He asked. Zoe tapped the screen. I didn't tell it to record anything. You don't have to. He looked up. What? Marcus smiled faintly. The best emergency systems don't wait for permission. The display scrolled through several lines of encrypted data before opening a protected archive. Automatic distress buffer. Timestamp. New. DOS. DISIT. Source detected. Aviation emergency locator. Signal integrity. 41%. Elena leaned over Marcus's shoulder. Can you play it back? Zoe nodded. It's not audio. What is it? Raw transmission. She connected a small adapter from her backpack and expanded the waveform onto the device's larger engineering interface. Instead of voices, a stream of digital pulses appeared. Marcus stared at them, his eyes narrowed. Slow it down. Zoe reduced the playback speed to 1/4. The repeating pulses transformed into readable diagnostic packets. Elena gasped. Oh my God. Marcus immediately recognized what she had seen. Embedded inside the transmission was the emergency module's unique hardware fingerprint, not just the serial number printed on the outside. The permanent internal identification burned into its processor during manufacturing. That identifier could never be altered without destroying the chip itself. Grant could replace labels. He could rewrite paperwork. He couldn't rewrite silicon. Marcus looked at Zoe. Your beacon bridge didn't just hear the signal. It identified the transmitter. She blinked. So they changed the module. He pointed to the screen, but your device already remembered the original one. Elena quickly copied the archive onto her encrypted flash drive. If this fingerprint matches the retired military database, Marcus finished the sentence. Then Pike can't claim the module never existed. For the first time since arriving at the airport, hope quietly returned. 30 minutes later, Elena gained temporary access to an isolated engineering workstation through a former colleague who still trusted her. The secure terminal wasn't connected to Meridian Crown's internal servers. Grant couldn't erase anything from it. She inserted the flash drive. The system processed the archive, then displayed a result. Component family, LQ-117A. Original manufacturer, Pike Aeronautics Systems. Military production batch, 14. BR. Marcus didn't breathe. He already knew what came next. The screen refreshed again. Status rejected. Authorized for destruction. Elena slowly leaned back. They installed military scrap. On a civilian passenger aircraft, Marcus finished. But there's more. She opened another database. This one contained archived military procurement record. After several searches, one file appeared. Restricted historical equipment failure investigation. Access denied, Marcus quietly said. Search by mission. What mission? He hesitated, then answered. Operation Silent Harbor. Elena entered the name. The computer paused. Then, a maintenance summary opened. No longer classified. Recently declassified. Marcus stared silently at the screen. His own mission. After 12 years, the report listed every communication component recovered from the crash site, every failed locator, every damaged transmitter, every serial number. Marcus's eyes stopped on one entry. LQ-117A, batch 14. BR, exactly the same. He closed his eyes. So it really was there. Elena looked at him. You never knew? Marcus slowly shook his head. The official investigation blamed environmental interference. They lied. I always suspected. His voice became quieter. I just never had proof. At the same moment, Captain Daniel Mercer arrived carrying a weathered military folder. I thought you might need this. Marcus looked surprised. You still kept it? Daniel smiled sadly. I kept everything. Inside the folder were faded photographs from the rescue mission. Maps, medical reports, flight diagram. Then, a maintenance checklist signed before takeoff. Daniel pointed to the bottom. I never noticed this until years later. Marcus examined the page. There it was. Inspection approved. Equipment certified. Signed by Raymond Pike. Marcus looked up slowly, so he knew. Daniel nodded. He certified the equipment himself. Elena whispered, This isn't negligence. Marcus answered, No. It's a pattern. Across the airport, Caleb sat inside his aging pickup truck parked beyond the employee lot. His suspension papers rested on the passenger seat. He barely noticed them. Instead, he opened his cloud storage account. The photograph was still there, safe, untouched. He immediately downloaded another copy, then another, then emailed it to 3 different accounts. Only after finishing did he finally call Zoe instead of Marcus. To his surprise, she answered, "Caleb? I still have it." Her eyes widened. "You do?" The picture survived. Marcus reached for the phone. "Don't send it through the airline network." "I won't." "I'm coming to you." Vanessa remained inside the terminal, staring at the incident report she had signed. She read the sentence again. Passenger attempted unauthorized access. Every word felt heavier than before. She remembered Marcus never raising his voice, never threatening anyone, never trying to enter the cockpit. The report wasn't merely inaccurate. It was false. Grant approached her. "The replacement crew boards in 20 minutes. She nodded absent-mindedly. "Good." He noticed her expression. "Something wrong?" She looked directly at him. "Did Marcus Reed ever actually commit ticket fraud?" Grant answered without hesitation. "No." "So why did we treat him like he did?" Grant sighed. "We protected the airline. We protected ourselves." Grant's expression cooled. "Be careful. I've been careful all morning. And I don't like who it's turning me into." Grant leaned closer. "You still have a career." Vanessa didn't answer. "You still have health insurance." Her face changed. Grant knew exactly where to strike. "I'd think very carefully before throwing that away." He walked off without another word. Vanessa remained frozen. Her brother's next dialysis appointment was in 4 days. Without insurance, she didn't even want to calculate the bills, but another thought refused to leave her. How many passengers had trusted her today? How many believed she would always tell them the truth? She quietly stood, then walked toward the security office. Inside, archived surveillance footage from Gate 42 was scheduled for automatic deletion within 2 hours. She inserted a blank flash drive, copied everything. Check-in, the confrontation, the salute. Every second, when the transfer finished, she slipped the drive into her jacket pocket. She had just become something Grant feared more than any investigator, a witness. An hour later, Marcus, Zoe, Elena, Daniel, Caleb, and Vanessa gathered in a small conference room provided by airport police. The evidence now covered the table. Zoe transmission archive, Caleb's photograph, Daniel's military maintenance record, Vanessa's surveillance footage. Elena connected every piece together on a whiteboard. Marcus studied it quietly, one clue after another, until the picture became impossible to ignore. The photograph proves the module was installed. Elena pointed. The transmission proves that module was active. Daniel added, the military record proves Pike knew this production batch was defective. Vanessa placed the flash drive beside the others, and the surveillance footage proves Marcus never did what the incident report claimed. Marcus looked around the room. For the first time all day, no one was guessing anymore. They had evidence, real evidence. Enough to expose discrimination, enough to expose falsified maintenance, enough to expose corruption. Daniel broke the silence. We should leak this. Marcus immediately shook his head. No. Vanessa looked surprised. Why not? Because incomplete truth becomes another rumor. Elena understood. You want federal investigators. Marcus nodded. I want this to survive court. No one argued. At that exact moment, Elena's engineering tablet vibrated. She looked at the notification. Then her face lost all color. Marcus noticed. What is it? She slowly turned the screen toward everyone. The maintenance database showed that the newly installed emergency locator module had just completed its self-test. Model number, different. Serial number, different. But one line remained exactly the same. Internal failure signature, LQ117A, batch 14, BR. Marcus stared at the screen. They didn't replace the defect. Daniel frowned. They replaced the label. Marcus looked toward the window where the replacement flight crew was preparing the aircraft. His voice dropped to a whisper. They're about to send another plane into the sky, with the same deadly heart inside it. Marcus was already walking before anyone else in the room reacted. We're out of time. Captain Daniel Mercer grabbed his flight bag. I'm coming. Elena unplugged the flash drive containing every copied maintenance record. Suwangwai. Vanessa hesitated for only a second before following them. If she turned back now, everything she had done during the last hour would mean nothing. Outside, Gate 42 had become unusually crowded. The replacement crew had arrived. Passengers who had been delayed for nearly 3 hours were finally lining up again, eager to board. Many still believed Marcus Reed had been responsible for the inconvenience. Grant Halpern stood behind the podium with the practiced smile of a man determined to regain control. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced through the microphone, "thank you for your patience. Following a complete inspection, Flight 702 has been cleared for departure. Safety has never been compromised." Scattered applause followed. Several passengers looked relieved. Marcus stepped forward. "That's not true." The applause stopped instantly. Grant closed his eyes for half a second. He had hoped Marcus would simply disappear. Instead, he had returned, and he wasn't alone. Daniel walked beside him in full captain's uniform. Elena carried a stack of printed engineering report. Vanessa approached from the opposite side of the gate. Passengers immediately recognized her. The atmosphere changed. Phones appeared again. People began recording. Grant forced another smile. "Mr. Reed, this isn't the appropriate place," Marcus answered calmly. "It became the appropriate place when you told 187 passengers the aircraft was safe." Grant looked toward airport security. Before he could signal them, Daniel spoke. "No one touched him." The authority in the captain's voice made even the officers hesitate. Grant recovered quickly. "Captain Mercer, you're no longer assigned to this flight." Daniel nodded. "That's true. So you have no operational authority." "I don't need authority to tell the truth." A murmur spread through the crowd. Grant realized he was losing control. He picked up the microphone again. "Passengers, please understand that certain individuals are attempting to create unnecessary concern based on incomplete information." Marcus didn't argue. Instead, he turned to Zoe. "Would you show everyone?" She nodded. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the beacon bridge. The small screen illuminated. Marcus connected it to one of the airport's public display monitors using an adapter Elena carried. Within seconds, the waveform from Flight 702 filled the large screen above the gate. Passengers looked up in confusion. "What is that?" Marcus answered. "The airplane's own emergency locator transmission." Grant interrupted. "That proves nothing." Marcus remained calm. "You're right." He looked at Zoe. "Play the diagnostic." She pressed a key. The waveform transformed into decoded engineering data. Lines of text scrolled across the monitor. Module family: LQ-117A. Manufacturer: Pike Aeronautics. Status: destroyed military recall. A collective murmur swept through the terminal. Grant immediately shook his head. Those records could be fabricated. Elena stepped forward. They weren't. She displayed her engineering credentials. "My name is Elena Park. I was the airport systems analyst responsible for reviewing these maintenance reports." Grant laughed softly. "You were." She met his eyes. "Until you revoked my system access." The crowd grew quieter. Elena continued. "I reported repeated emergency locator failures on Flight 702. She held up printed documents. Every report was marked resolved without my approval. Grant's smile disappeared. "Those are internal documents. They're also evidence." Marcus watched the passengers. The same people who had whispered about him earlier were no longer looking at him. They were looking at Grant, exactly where the questions belonged. Grant took one step toward Marcus. "You're a communications technician." "Yes." "Not an aviation investigator." "No." "So why should anyone believe you?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward Daniel. The captain understood. Without a word, he removed another weathered folder from his flight bag. He opened it carefully. Inside rested faded military documents protected by plastic sleeves. Daniel held up the final page. 12 years ago, he said, I survived a crash because Staff Sergeant Marcus Reed refused to leave me behind. Silence. He also rescued 23 civilians that night. Marcus lowered his eyes. Daniel continued anyway. The emergency locator equipment involved in that mission carried the exact same production batch listed on today's aircraft. He handed the maintenance summary to a federal aviation investigator who had quietly arrived moments earlier. The investigator studied the signature, then looked up. "Who is Raymond Pike?" Before anyone answered, a confident voice came from behind the crowd. "I am." Every head turned. Raymond Pike walked through the terminal surrounded by 2 attorneys. Expensive charcoal suit, perfect posture, perfect smile. He looked nothing like the man Marcus remembered from faded military paperwork. Raymond extended his hand toward the investigator. "Raymond Pike, president of Pike Aeronautics Logistics." The investigator accepted the handshake politely. "We're reviewing concerns regarding your emergency locator system." Raymond smiled. "My company has supplied aviation equipment for years." Marcus finally spoke. "And how many defective units did you supply?" Raymond looked at him for the first time. Recognition flickered across his face. "So, The rescuer survived. Marcus didn't react. Neither man smiled. Grant interrupted quickly. Mr. Pike has already assured us. Raymond raised one finger. Allow me. He looked toward the gathered passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, counterfeit identification plates have become common throughout the aviation supply industry. Elena frowned. Counterfeit? Raymond nodded confidently. If someone copied our manufacturing codes, my company would appear responsible. Grant visibly relaxed. Passengers began whispering again. The explanation sounded believable. Marcus had expected exactly that. He looked toward Daniel. Now, Daniel removed one final document from the folder. Unlike the others, it wasn't faded. It was an original maintenance certification bearing a blue government seal. He handed it directly to the investigator. This inspection was completed before our mission. The investigator scanned the page. His expression changed. This certification, he looked up at Raymond. Contain your signature. Raymond's smile froze. It appears to. It doesn't appear to. The investigator turned the page over. The authentication seal confirms it. Raymond's attorneys stepped closer. We advise our client not to answer further questions. Grant suddenly realized something terrifying. Raymond wasn't protecting him. Raymond was protecting himself. The investigator looked back at the certification. This document states that production batch 14BR met operational standard. Marcus spoke quietly. And the military investigation later rejected the entire batch. Elena added, yet the same components somehow found their way onto civilian aircraft. Raymond answered for the first time without smiling. That's speculation. No, Marcus replied. It isn't. Caleb entered the terminal at that exact moment, breathing hard from running across the employee parking lot. I've got another copy. Everyone turned. He held up a printed photograph, the original module before they removed it. He handed it to the investigator. The serial number matched Zoe's transmission archive perfectly. The investigator looked from the photograph to the maintenance report, then to Raymond. No one spoke. Finally, Grant found his voice. This doesn't prove intentional misconduct. Marcus looked directly at him. It proves enough to ask one simple question. Grant swallowed. Marcus stepped closer, not aggressively, calmly. Why? Was a military component officially destroyed 3 years ago installed on a commercial passenger aircraft this morning? Grant opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Raymond answered instead. My company didn't install it. Grant turned sharply. Raymond continued. Airport personnel contrôle installation. Grant stared at him in disbelief. You said... I said my company supplied equipment. Raymond took one step backward. What happened after delivery wasn't my responsibility. Grant finally understood. He was being abandoned. His phone vibrated. He glanced down instinctively. One unread message from Raymond's chief legal officer. Protect the company. Do not mention Pike internal directives. Grant slowly raised his eyes. Across the terminal, investigators were already speaking quietly into their radios. Then another investigator approached, carrying a gray equipment case recovered from the maintenance corridor. It's locked. The lead investigator looked at Raymond. Open it. Raymond didn't move. One of the investigators used a portable bolt cutter. The lock snapped open. Inside were dozens of unused serial number plates, each bearing different identification number, each ready to be attached to another emergency locator module. The investigator lifted a folder resting beneath them. His expression hardened. Interesting. He slowly turned the folder toward the crowd. The authorization forms inside all carried the same signature. Grant Halpern. Grant's face went completely white. For the first time that day, he had no explanation left. Grant Halpern stared at the authorization forms as though they belonged to someone else. His own signature covered every page, every approval, every installation request, every emergency override. The terminal had become eerily quiet. Passengers no longer whispered. They simply watched. The lead federal investigator carefully placed the documents into an evidence bag. Mr. Halpern, he said evenly, we'll need you to remain here. Grant didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on Raymond Pike. You told me those records were gone. Raymond's expression remained unreadable. I believed they were. Grant laughed once, a hollow, exhausted laugh. No. See, he slowly shook his head. You believed I'd never see them. Raymond said nothing. The silence answered for him. 2 federal agents stepped toward Raymond. One of his attorneys immediately intervened. My client has not been charged with any crime. Not yet, the investigator replied, but he's no longer free to leave. Raymond's polished confidence finally cracked. For the first time that day, He looked genuinely uneasy. Marcus watched the exchange without satisfaction. Justice had begun, but it wasn't finished. The lead investigator turned toward Grant. "We'll ask again. Who authorized these installations?" Grant swallowed. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "I did." A wave of murmurs spread through the passengers. Vanessa closed her eyes. Hearing the admission hurt more than she expected. The investigator continued. "Why?" Grant remained silent. Another question. "Were you aware these components had been removed from military service?" Still silent. Then, "My family." Everyone looked at him. "My divorce." His shoulders slumped. "I was already drowning." He looked toward the floor. "My consulting company failed. I owed money. My ex-wife petitioned for full custody of our son." He laughed bitterly. "I told myself one bonus, one promotion, one more quarter, and I'd fix everything." He finally looked up. Raymond said the components were safe. Raymond interrupted immediately. "That's a lie." Grant turned sharply. "You said they passed operational testing." "I said they met commercial tolerance." "You knew they were recalled." "I never said otherwise." Grant stared at him in disbelief. "You knew." Raymond's eyes remained cold. "I knew the probability of failure was extremely low." Marcus finally spoke. "Tell that to Isaiah Brooke." Raymond slowly turned toward him. "I don't know who that is." Marcus took one deliberate step forward. 12 years ago, Operation Silent Harbor. My partner. He died because emergency signals failed." For a moment, Raymond searched Marcus's face. Then recognition appeared. "Oh, the pararescue team." Marcus said nothing. Raymond sighed almost impatiently. "Military operations involve acceptable losses." The words echoed across the gate. Several passengers gasped. Daniel Mercer clenched his fists. Marcus remained perfectly still. Raymond continued. "If every equipment defect stopped every mission, nothing would ever fly." Marcus's breathing slowed. "Acceptable loss?" Raymond shrugged. "That's how large operations function." Marcus looked directly into his eyes. He had a wife. Raymond didn't answer. He had 2 little boys. Silence. He had a name. Raymond remained unmoved. Marcus's hands slowly tightened. Daniel noticed immediately. So did Zoo. She quietly reached for her father's hand. Marcus didn't even realize she had done it until he felt her fingers. Small, warm, steady. Exactly like they had been at Alicia's funeral. He looked down. Zoe met his eyes. "You told me something." Marcus swallowed. "What?" "Strength means protecting people without becoming the thing that hurt them." The words landed harder than any order ever had. Marcus slowly unclenched his fist, then stepped backward. Raymond almost smiled. He mistook restraint for weakness. Marcus corrected him. "I'm not stepping back for you." He looked toward the investigators. "I'm stepping back because justice needs evidence, not revenge." The lead investigator nodded quietly. "Thank you." Before anyone could speak again, another federal agent hurried through the crowd carrying a rugged black evidence case. "We found this inside Pike's secured maintenance vehicle." He placed it on a nearby table. Inside rested a portable encrypted drive. "No password yet," the agent explained. Grant looked at it. His face changed instantly. Raymond noticed. His composure finally disappeared. "Don't open that." The investigator looked up. "Interesting." Raymond took one step forward. "My company's proprietary data. It's evidence now." Raymond lunged toward the case. 2 agents stopped him immediately. The drive remained safely on the table. The investigator looked toward Grant. "You know the encryption key." Grant stared at the drive, then toward Raymond, the man who had promised promotions, protection, success. The man now trying to leave him, carrying every consequence alone. Grant closed his eyes. His phone vibrated. One new message. From his ex-wife, a photograph. Their 16-year-old son standing outside the terminal with her. The caption contained only 6 words. "He asked if you're telling truth." Grant stared at the message. His hands began shaking. For years, he had convinced himself he was protecting his future. Now, his own son was watching him choose what kind of man he wanted to be. Grant looked toward Raymond, then toward Marcus, finally toward the investigators. The password. He paused. "Is Isaiah 117. Marcus froze. "What?" Grant looked ashamed. The project files were named after the original military incident. Marcus felt sick. Even Isaiah's memory had been turned into an accounting label. The investigator entered the password. The encrypted drive unlocked. Hundreds of files appeared instantly. Purchase orders, maintenance directive, financial transfers, internal emails, engineering analyses. One folder stood out. Known failure reports. Elena opened it. The room fell silent. Every defective production batch, every hidden engineering recommendation, every internal warning had been documented. Raymond Pike had known. For 12 years, Another investigator opened a separate folder. Operation Silent Harbor. Marcus stopped breathing. Inside rested the complete military review, not the version released publicly. The original. Daniel slowly opened the first document, then another. Finally, an audio file. Label. Final transmission. Master Sergeant Isaiah Brooks. Marcus stared at the screen. His hands trembled. I've never heard this. Neither had Daniel. The investigator pressed play. Static filled the speaker. Then Isaiah's tired voice emerged. Command. This is Brooke. More static. Tell Reed. He made the right call. Marcus closed his eyes. Tears gathered before he realized it. Isaiah continued. He stayed. Longer than anyone should. A cough. Don't let him carry this. More interference. Then the final sentence. None of this was his fault. Silence. No one in the terminal moved. Marcus lowered his head. For 12 years, he had carried guilt that had never belonged to him. Daniel quietly rested a hand on his shoulder. You hear him now? Marcus nodded once. Unable to speak, the investigator continued reading the original report. Another paragraph had been removed from the public version. It recommended Marcus Reed for the nation's highest peacetime rescue recognition after deliberately disobeying an unsafe withdrawal order to save 23 civilians. Marcus whispered, I rejected the ceremony. Daniel looked at him. You rejected the ceremony they offered. He held up the report. They never canceled the recommendation. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? They buried it. They couldn't bury the record. The lead investigator closed the file. Mr. Reed, he spoke with quiet respect. You were never denied that honor. You were denied the truth. Federal agents approached Raymond Pike. This time, one of them said, You're under arrest. Fraud, bribery, obstruction of a federal investigation, knowingly supplying unsafe aviation components, reckless endangerment. The charges seemed endless. Another pair of agents approached Grant. Grant didn't resist. As they secured his hands, he looked once more toward Marcus. I don't expect forgiveness. Marcus shook his head. This isn't about forgiveness. Grant nodded sadly. I know. It's about finally stopping. Marcus watched him leave, then turned back toward the investigators. One request. The lead investigator looked at him. When the corrected report becomes public, Marcus glanced at the paused audio recording. Make sure Isaiah Brooks's family hears his real word. Before anyone hears mine, the investigator nodded. You have my word. Morning sunlight began pouring through the massive terminal window. Outside, Flight 702 remained at the gate. It would never leave with those defective components. Marcus looked at Zoe. She smiled through tears. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Not victory, not relief, peace. Then Daniel's phone vibrated. He read the message. A slow smile crossed his face. A replacement aircraft is ready. Marcus looked toward Zoe. Hope flickered again, until Daniel quietly added, It can still take you to Denver, but the engineering competition started 20 minutes ago. Marcus looked at his daughter. Neither of them knew yet that her greatest achievement had already begun. Marcus looked at Zoe, expecting to see disappointment. Instead, she surprised him. She took a slow breath, closed the Beacon Bridge case, and smiled. I guess Mom always said life doesn't read our schedules. Marcus let out a quiet laugh through eyes still damp with tears. No, it doesn't. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. I'm sorry. Marcus shook his head. Don't be. He looked at Zoe. We made the right choice. Before either of them could say another word, Elena hurried toward them, holding her phone. Zoo? She was smiling so broadly she could barely speak. The competition committee just called. Zhu blinked. What? They've been contacted by federal investigators. Marcus frowned. Why? Because your invention became part of an active aviation safety investigation. Zoe looked completely confused. They know about Beacon Bridge? Elena laughed softly. They know it may have helped prevent nearly 200 people from boarding an aircraft with a compromised emergency locator system. Within minutes, a video conference was arranged inside a quiet airport meeting room. On the large screen appeared 6 judges from the National Young Innovators Championship in Denver. One of them smiled warmly. Miss Reed, we understand you were unable to arrive because of extraordinary circumstances. Zoe glanced nervously at Marcus. We never wanted special treatment. The chairwoman nodded. You aren't receiving special treatment. She paused. You're receiving the opportunity every young inventor deserves. Another judge leaned forward. We've reviewed the preliminary report from federal investigators. He smiled. Apparently your project did exactly what you designed it to do. Zoe looked down at Beacon Bridge. It listened. It remembered. It helped people. The judge nodded. Exactly. They gave Zoe 30 minutes to present remotely. Marcus stood quietly against the back wall while she connected her prototype to the conference system. The room disappeared around her. She spoke with confidence, not about winning competitions, not about technology. She spoke about her mother. When my mom was hurt, Zoe said, rescuers couldn't find her quickly because different systems disagreed about where she was. She paused. I couldn't change what happened, but maybe I could help the next family. She demonstrated how Beacon Bridge automatically stored emergency transmissions, preserving diagnostic information even if the original equipment was later removed or replaced. The judges asked difficult technical questions. Zoe answered every one. When she finished, the room remained silent for several seconds. Finally, the chairwoman smiled. Miss Reed. She glanced toward the other judges. We've reached a unanimous decision. Zoe held her breath. You will not receive first place. Marcus gently squeezed her shoulder. She smiled anyway. I understand. But, the chairwoman continued, the judging panel has voted to create a special Public Safety Innovation Award. Zoe's eyes widened. The judge continued, in partnership with the American Foundation for Emergency Technology, we are also awarding you a full educational scholarship. Tears filled Zoe's eye. Marcus closed his own. For the first time since Alicia's death, he wished she could have seen this moment. Perhaps she somehow had. The weeks that followed changed many lives. Federal investigators uncovered years of concealed maintenance records. More than 60 aircraft across multiple regional carriers were inspected. Several defective emergency locator modules were removed before they could ever place passengers at risk. Meridian Crown Airlines issued a public apology, not the carefully worded statement drafted by attorneys, a genuine one. The airline acknowledged that Marcus Reed and Zoe Reed had been subjected to unfair treatment based on assumptions rather than facts, and that internal management failures had allowed discrimination and safety concerns to intersect in unacceptable ways. The company announced sweeping reform, independent maintenance oversight, anonymous employee reporting channels, mandatory bias awareness and ethics training. No announcement could erase what Marcus and Zoe had experienced, but it could help prevent someone else from enduring the same injustice. Vanessa Cole resigned before disciplinary action could begin. Many people expected Marcus to celebrate. He didn't. When she asked to meet him one final time, he agreed. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. Marcus nodded. You do. She looked down. I judged you before I knew you. You judged what you thought my life looked like. A tear escaped before she brushed it away. My little brother asked why I was crying. She laughed softly through her tears. I didn't know how to tell him I almost became someone I never wanted him to admire. Marcus remained silent. Finally, he said, the hardest apology isn't spoken. She looked up. It's Liv. Months later, Vanessa accepted a position with an independent aviation ethics organization, helping train new supervisors on fairness, accountability, and the danger of making assumptions. She often began every seminar with the same sentence. The worst mistake I ever made happened before I asked the first honest question. Caleb Price returned to work with full back pay. Federal whistleblower protections ensured he could never again be punished for reporting safety concern. When reporters called him brave, he always smiled awkwardly. I just forgot to look away. Elena Park became the director of a newly formed Independent Aviation Systems Review Office. The first framed item she hung inside her office wasn't a diploma. It was a printed screenshot from Beacon Bridge showing the original transmission that no one had managed to erase. Below it, she placed a simple plaque. Datas noego. Listen to it. Grant Halpern pleaded guilty to fraud, obstruction of a federal investigation, bribery, and falsifying aviation safety records. His cooperation helped investigators uncover additional misconduct, reducing but not eliminating his sentence. Months later, during a supervised family visit, his teenage son quietly asked him one question. Are you done lying now? Grant answered with the first completely honest sentence he had spoken in years. I hope so. Raymond Pike received a lengthy federal prison sentence after investigators linked his company to multiple concealed equipment failures across the country. Pike Aeronautics dissolved under the weight of lawsuits, criminal convictions, and public outrage. 3 months later, Marcus stood inside a quiet military auditorium. Rows of veterans filled the room. So did Isaiah Brooks's family. Before the ceremony began, Marcus walked to Isaiah's widow. He handed her the corrected mission report. This belongs to your family first. She opened it with trembling hand. When she reached Isaiah's final recorded words, she began to cry. Then she embraced Marcus without saying anything. No words were necessary. During the ceremony, the The presenter invited Marcus to the stage to receive the long-delayed recognition he had refused years earlier. Marcus stopped halfway. He turned. One condition. The presenter nodded. Marcus held out his hand toward Zoe. "My daughter comes with me." She hurried onto the stage. Father and daughter stood together beneath the light. Marcus accepted the medal only after Isaiah's name was spoken first. When the applause ended, Marcus stepped to the microphone. He looked across the audience before speaking. Courage isn't measured by how loudly people cheer for you. He glanced at Zoe. It's measured by what you choose when no one is watching. He smiled gently. And sometimes, the bravest voice in the room belongs to an 11-year-old girl who reminds her father who he already is. Several months later, Marcus and Zoe returned to Hartwell International Airport. This time, they were traveling to Denver simply because Zoe wanted to visit the engineering museum she had missed. Marcus wore the same repaired brown work jacket, the same worn boots, the same quiet smile. He had not changed his appearance. He had simply stopped apologizing for it. As they boarded the aircraft, Captain Daniel Mercer stood at the cockpit door. He smiled, then silently raised his hand, a military salute. Marcus returned it without hesitation. Behind him, Zoe giggled. Then she gave her father the most serious salute an 11-year-old could manage. Marcus laughed. "That's the only rank I ever needed." Father and daughter walked down the aisle together. Outside the window, morning sunlight stretched across the runway. Inside the overhead compartment rested the Beacon Bridge. No longer just a science project. Now a reminder that even the quietest voice, backed by truth, could protect hundreds of lives. The aircraft lifted gently into the bright blue sky. For the first time in many years, Marcus wasn't leaving the past behind. He was carrying it forward with peace instead of guilt. Life has a way of revealing character when no one expects it. Marcus was judged because of how he looked, not because of who he was. Vanessa allowed assumptions to replace questions. Grant convinced himself that small compromises were harmless until they became impossible to escape. Raymond valued profit over human life. Yet in the middle of all that, an 11-year-old girl refused to believe that doing the right thing should depend on whether it was convenient. That is what makes real courage so powerful. It doesn't always arrive wearing a uniform or standing on a stage. Sometimes it appears in quiet honesty, in choosing evidence over anger, in refusing to lie even when the truth carries a heavy cost. Marcus could have sought revenge, but he chose justice. He could have humiliated those who humiliated him, but instead he protected the integrity of the investigation. That choice didn't erase his pain, but it finally freed him from it. The people we become are shaped less by what happens to us than by how we answer those moments. May we all have the wisdom to ask, before we judge, the humility to admit when we're wrong, and the courage to stand for what is right, even when standing alone feels impossible. If Marcus's journey moved you, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and whether you think you would have made the same choice he did. We'd also love to know what time it is where you are, and if you enjoy heartfelt stories about family, courage, justice, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one.